Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Luke, for this kind introduction on myself. And first of all, I would like to thank you very much to ESPON organizers for inviting me at this really important and very interesting ESPON peer learning workshop. I'm going to present very shortly on some of the main results on integrating land-sea interactions in the cross-border maritime spatial planning to address marine pollution as a key planning issue. These results we have obtained within currently implemented Mars Plan BS2 project, which is coordinated by the Bulgarian Ministry of Regional Development and Public Works. I'm actually coordinating the activity on land sea interactions. I'm coordinator for the Center for Coastal and Marine Studies for the project. Next slide, please. So first of all, I would like to make a short introduction on the MSP status in the Black Sea, in particular Bulgaria and Romania as European Union member states. The maritime spatial planning process and development has been started, and the Directive 2014/99 of the European Union was transposed in both countries' national legislations. After that, competent MSP authorities have been designated in both countries. In Bulgaria, this is the Ministry of Regional Development and Public Works, and in Romania, the Ministry of Public Works, Development and Administration. And currently, the national maritime special plans in Bulgaria and in Romania are under development, as well as the stakeholder consultations, seminars and discussions have been started, and national special plan should be completed until 31st of March 2021 as required by the MSP directive. Next slide, please. Well, as I've already mentioned, there are two projects, Mars Plan BS1, and which was completed in 2019, and the currently implemented Mars Plan BS2 projects focus on the cross-border maritime spatial planning in Bulgaria and in Romania. They are funded by the European Commission, Directorate General of Maritime Affairs and Fisheries, within Executive Agency of Small and Medium Enterprises, and funded by the European Maritime Fisheries Fund of the European Union. So the projects aim to support directly the competent MSP authorities in Bulgaria and Romania for the implementation of MSP directive. Also, the main objectives are to ensure continuity in the cross-border MSP process for the Black Sea Basin, to support the elaboration of the maritime spatial plans in Bulgaria and Romania, and to develop the MSP common strategy for the cross-border area Bulgaria and Romania, addressing also land interactions and multi-use concept of the sea space. Also, the project aims to provide effective stakeholder participation engagement in the MSP process, to share the information for the best available data, and to communicate the knowledge gained on the MSP all across the Black Sea Basin. So one of the main activities in the Mars Plan BS2 project is developing relevant methodology for analysis and integration of LSI in the MSP that would be used as a guidance for further repetition models applicable to the national MSP plans of Bulgaria and Romania. Next slide, please. What are the lengthy interactions in the MSP context? Most maritime coastal activities are closely interrelated, and so to promote the sustainable use of marine space, the marine and maritime spatial planning should take land sea interactions into account when developed and implemented as required by the MSP directive. For example, many maritime activities also have a terrestrial component or connection such as the shipping sector's need for ports or grid connections. Natural processes also involve interactions between land and sea, such as coastal erosion and accretion caused by currents and waves. So human activities and natural processes therefore interact with each other in a very complex way along the dynamic land-sea interface. Indeed, the concept of land-sea interaction is not new. Starting from the early 1990s, from the Rio Conference, and continuing then with a large number of integrated coastal zone management strategies, initiatives, and programs, as well as project-based efforts, etc. But the meaning of the LSI concept remains quite unclear in an MSP context. So how it should be applied in the reality, how it should be applied in practice, which consequently has made it difficult to be implemented. The DG Mare, the European Commission DG Mare briefing paper from a conference focused on land-sea interactions in June 2017 in Malta, shown for the first time, as you can see from the scheme, the general framework or the general definition of the land-sea interactions in the MSP context. And actually shown for the first time many different institutional and legislative approaches to addressing natural and socioeconomic key issues for LSI. So the options for addressing land-sea interactions in MSP vary. They could involve integrated coastal zone management initiatives, if exist, harmonizing terrestrial maritime spatial planning, coordinating terrestrial marine spatial plans, or national and sea basin strategies. It is for each country or MSP authority actually to decide on the most appropriate mechanism for taking into account the land-sea interactions when developing maritime spatial planning. Next slide, please. Almost all available LSI definitions so far have drawn attention to the interactions between environmental socioeconomic factors or uses across the land-sea interface, as well as some also include reference to governance systems and connections. In addition, the need to consider a two-way LSI perspective has been highly encouraged as it was explored by the recently developed, recently completed MSP LSI ESPON project. So LSI looking from the sea to the land has impacts on the good environmental status of the sea, or LSI looking from the land to the sea as how environmental conditions in the sea might have adverse impacts on the health and well-being of landward communities. During the years, several EU-funded projects, both completed or still in progress, actually have helped to elucidate the exploration of land-sea interactions. This concept was in particular analyzed by the Isidore European Seas and Territorial Development Opportunity Centers, as it has been mentioned in the beginning of the workshop. This study was developed within the framework of the ESPON 2013 program, and the project created a typology map of European Sea showing the hotspot of land-sea interactions associated in land areas, demonstrating through analysis of data related to transport flows, socioeconomic significance of the maritime economy, and environmental pressures when land-sea interactions are at their most intense. Next slide, please. Well, in Bulgaria and in Romania, although the MSP directive was successfully transposed in the national legislation, there has been an exact definition for the concept of land-sea interactions in the national frameworks. Although Bulgaria and Romania have started together in the MSP process and developing, the countries have different institutional systems and planning legislation, as well as different LSI approaches. Furthermore, cross-border transboundary dimension should be also taken into account, despite the MSP's national endeavor and consideration to LSI have more specific study and local context. In particular, the added value of the Marsplan BS2 project is its explicit cross-border context. Therefore, the first step when we start the working process in this LSI activity was to set up a common conceptual analytical framework and to set up a common LSI definition for the cross-border MSP context. So in setting and refining a common LSI framework, we have drawn many perceptions and insights from previous works and projects. For instance, many insights and aspects of the Supreme project for Eastern Mediterranean maritime special planning, Pan-Baltic scope for Baltic cross-border maritime special planning, and the already mentioned MSP-LSI ESPON projects match the insights and the approach taken in Marsplan BS2 project. Indeed, the approach that we have taken actually reflects the cross-border focus of two countries, Bulgaria and Romania, that are at the beginning of the MSP process and that are less experienced in MSP and working with actual LSI challenges in a problem-based manner. With these considerations in mind, our analytical framework actually consists of 4 dimensions, taking into consideration a two-way perspective. First, interactions related to natural processes across the land sea interface and their interaction with human activities both on the land and the sea. Second, interactions between socioeconomic uses and activities at the sea and at the land, but considering also their impacts on coastal marine environments, because different countries have different governance, special planning system. We also include this dimension and different institutional frameworks managing land sea interactions, and finally some MSP process related aspects or how to integrate the main outcomes of LSI analysis into the MSP process. Respectively, our common definition is the following: land sea interaction is a complex phenomenon that involves interactions related to natural processes and interactions between socioeconomic uses, activities, and within the coastal marine environments in both directions, the governance arrangements, frameworks for managing these interactions, and possible ways for their integration into the MSP process. And as you can see from the conceptual framework for common LSI approach for the Black Sea, the stakeholder involvement, active stakeholder engagement, and temporal dimensions are actually horizontal and vertical temporal dimension, horizontal and vertical cross-cutting linkages to the whole conceptual framework. Next slide, please. Well, in accordance to the adapting approaches and capitalizing results from previous works, as I've already mentioned, the entire process of considering the LSI can be divided into 3 main phases. First, setting context and following the agreed conceptual framework and definition, analyzing land sea interactions using a step-by-step methodology, and feeding the outcomes and key messages from the LSI analysis into the maritime special planning process. Next slide, please. Well, this scheme provides a snapshot representation about how the proposed methodology for LSI analysis actually can be integrated into the MSP process. So the methodology will include a stepwise process considering an initial and more general stock taking phase, which is consists part A, followed by an in-depth analysis about most relevant key interactions, part B, and concluding with final phase, part C, to actually inform the planning process on the key outcomes from the LSI analysis. The scheme also presents how the different steps of LSI methodology from the three phases actually correspond to the different steps of the MSP process following the IOC-UNESCO step-by-step approach toward ecosystem-based management. And transferring of LSI analysis outcomes or key messages according to the last step in the proposed methodology actually represents the final, perhaps the most critical phase in the process of LSI analysis and integrating into the MSP. Next slide, please. When starting to implement the activity, first we made very detailed desk research. We have also started interviews with a wide number of different and lengthy interactions relevant stakeholders in Bulgaria and in Romania, and we have identified a lot of lengthy interaction examples which actually can be considered as key interactions for key lengthy interactions for Bulgaria and Romania. For example, key LSI issues regarding to natural processes for Bulgaria and Romania are related to coastal erosion, storm and flooding events, as well as to landslides, saline intrusion into the fresh water, as well as pollution from landward activities, i.e. the impact on the good environmental status of the marine environment. At the same time, human activities also can interfere with natural processes. For example, a large number of installed solid coastal protection structures such as growing seawalls and dikes, revetments, breakwaters have intensified coastal erosion along the Bulgarian and Romanian coast. So the analysis of the expected impacts of land and marine activities should include evaluation of their effects on LSI natural processes and potential consequent effects on natural resources and ecosystem services. And for interactions which are caused by human activities and uses, usually such interactions include, for example, maritime uses that need support installations on land, but also some uses that exist mostly on the land, for example, tourism, recreation, ports, but they expand their activities to the sea as well. And these interactions should be also carefully and in details understood in order to assess their individual cumulative impacts and potential conflicts and synergies. So you can see that human-induced eutrophication, substances, marine litter, farming, livestock farming and industry are actually one of the key lengthy interactions and one of the main sources for pollution in the Black Sea. Next slide, please. Here with this slide, I would like to give very short example of the results that we have actually obtained in the first Mars Plan BS project. A number of different natural human-induced LSI were identified based on the pilot case study for Burgas, Bulgaria. Burgas is the fourth largest city situated along the South Bulgarian coast, and the city has highly developed industry, including coal industry, but at the same time there are valuable wetlands, Natura 2000 protected sites in the surroundings. So it was really a big challenge to explore the lengthy interactions with a focus on biodiversity. So the results were based on lengthy interaction conflict synergy matrix, in which with green are actually synergies, with yellow weak conflicts, with red strong conflicts, and the empty boxes denote no interactions. So the highest number of land sea conflict interactions was indicated for the oil pipelines, wastewater discharge and tiling dams, with the quality of buffing waters, coastal fishing, intake waters and protected areas. Next slide, please. When we actually integrating land sea interactions in the maritime spatial planning and need to address properly marine pollution, it's important to consider a two-way perspective, because the solid and liquid waste actually originates from both land-based and sea-based sources. So looking from the land sea perspective, we need to take into account discharge of nutrients and pesticides from industry, households, traffic, agriculture, river sediment transport and runoff, agricultural runoff, livestock, landfills for household and construction industrial waste that actually do not meet the environmental requirements, including sewage networks from coastal settlements, other urbanized areas. As you can see from the diagram, only 3% at average from the household waste along the Bulgarian coastal municipalities is actually sent for recycling. Also, coastal tourism is strongly related to land sea interaction, as it depends on the quality of the coastal and marine environment, but at the same time it's a relevant pressure on the same environment it is based on. So for example, coastal population in the peak summer season can typically increase with 20%, but at some municipalities over 320%. So the existing facilities and infrastructure in these most crowded coastal municipalities are unable to meet this additional pressure, and these peak periods often overwhelm local treatment capacity, resulting in heavy impacts on the natural ecosystems and the quality of marine waters. Also, port and harbor development activities, urban development constructions could be sources of marine pollution. Next slide, please. And looking from sea land perspective, there are many maritime activities that could actually be a source of marine pollution: dredging and dumping, oil and gas production, offshore installations, crude oil transportation, which creates risk of oil spill accidents, shipping and cruising, as well as commercial, recreational fishing, aquaculture facilities, including close and abandoned fishing nets and gear, as shown on the second and third photo on this slide. Unregulated discharges of wastewater from vessels, transboundary shipment of solid waste, marine litter, as shown on the first photo. All these photos were taken this summer at one of the last remaining natural beaches in Bulgaria. Next slide, please. And because marine litter in the Black Sea originates almost completely from solid waste pollution, both from land-based and sea-based sources, as a result of different array of human activities, and due to the multivectorial negative impact of marine litter, when it comes to its prevention, we need a holistic management approach. And the recently developed Source to Sea framework for marine litter prevention is a valuable approach to the rapidly increasing need to prevent plastic leakage to riverine and coastal and marine environments. So the framework follows 6 steps that together present a methodological approach to understand the types, sources, impacts of land-based plastic pollution, the various actors that contribute to the sources, solution to marine litter, as well as analysis of the current governance, management, orientations, behaviors that are leading to marine litter. And this framework could be taken as a holistic management approach that can be integrated with existing approaches such as maritime spatial planning, coastal zone management, and integrated water resource management. Next slide, please. And of course, when integrating in the MSP approach, marine pollution as a key planning issue, and when trying to address properly the marine pollution, there are many legal and policy instruments at international, regional, European Union, and national levels that actually support the integrated approach of maritime spatial planning and actually support the development and integration of all these regulations and legislations into the MSP process. I showed the main of them into the integrated MSP approaches, starting from UNCLOS and MARPOL conventions, and following with the main pillars of the European Union environmental protection, including marine pollution, such as Water Framework Directive and Marine Strategy Framework Directive, which are implementing with respective programs of measures in Bulgaria and Romania, but as well as in other Black Sea countries. Next slide, please. And actually, on this final slide of my presentation, I show the cross-border area of Bulgaria where we have already started to test the proposed LSI methodology. So the case study area is geographically located along the North Bulgarian coast, near to the Romanian border, and administratively in the Shabla municipality. So you can see that we have in this case study area, we need to take into account the wide array of sea, land, and land sea interactions that actually go far beyond this very short coastal land sea interface. Here the overlap of the national MSP with the municipal coastal planning is emphasized as ensuring one space, as it has been already mentioned, or planning one continuum, as many activities have direct or indirect impacts on coastal areas. Closer collaboration between MSP competent authorities and coastal municipalities' territorial planning is actually needed to promote sustainably and ecologically effective uses on land and sea, especially for those with implications across the land-sea boundary. Thank you very much for your attention.